everybody, Eric again. Like and subscribe. Here we go. Let's read about the IPCRESS File. The IPCRESS File is Len Deighton's first spy novel, published in 1962. The story involves Cold War brainwashing and includes scenes in Lebanon and an atoll for the United States atomic weapon test, as well as information about Joe 1, the Soviet Union's first atomic bomb. The story was made into a 1965 film and the 2022 TV series. Plot. The novel takes the form of the unnamed protagonist's personal report to the Minister of Defense, thus becoming the IPCRESS File of the title. Events begin soon after the protagonist's transfer from military intelligence to WOOCP, a small civilian intelligence agency reporting directly to the British cabinet, where he works under the command of a man named Dalby. An intelligence broker, codenamed Jay, is suspected to be behind a series of kidnappings of British VIPs with the intention of selling them to the Soviets, and the protagonist is assigned to meet Jay to secure the release of Waven, a high-ranking scientist. While returning to meet Jay at a Soho strip club to negotiate Waven's release, the protagonist discovers Waven's unconscious body in a back room, but is unsuccessful in trying to rescue him. WOOCP learns that Waven is to be transferred to the Soviets in Beirut, and a rescue mission is organized. The protagonist is assigned as a lookout and kills the occupants of a car that suddenly arrives on the scene. Believing them to be operatives working for Jay, they instead turn out to be members of the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence. The operation is otherwise a success, and Waven is recovered, but investigation into Jay continues. A break appears when House Martin, one of Jay's high-ranking operatives, is arrested in Shoreditch, but the protagonist and another operative arrive at the police station, only to discover that House Martin has been murdered in his cell. Information from the U.S. enables WOOCP and the police to storm one of Jay's safe houses, but it has been abandoned. A military statistician, Carswell, and his assistant, Murray, are assigned to WOOCP to attempt to find a statistical link between the disappearances of the scientists and to help with the administration of the department, while the protagonist is assigned an assistant, Jane Toonson, a beautiful young woman towards whom he begins to develop romantic feelings. Dalby reveals intelligence suggesting that Jay's operations will interfere with an American neutral bomb test in the Pacific. He, Jean, and the protagonist are sent to the test site as British observers, and while the protagonist learns from an old friend in the Central Intelligence Agency that the Americans suspect him of being a double agent due to the deaths of the U.S. operatives. Jean reveals that Dalby has been visiting an abandoned Japanese bunker on the island, and while following Dalby to the scene, the protagonist is present when the site is sabotaged, setting back the bomb test and killing a military police officer. The protagonist is arrested by the Americans and interrogated, before apparently being transferred to Hungary on suspicions of being a Soviet agent. There he is drugged and subjected to physiological and physical torture and nearly cracks before eventually managing to escape, only to discover that he is in fact in London. The protagonist takes refuge with Charlie Cavendish, the father of a friend killed during the Second World War, and attempts to re-establish contact with WOOCP without being arrested. Charlie is killed by Jay's operatives, forcing the protagonist on the run. He approaches Dalby at his home, but discovers Dalby with Jay, Murray, and another of Jay's operatives, confirming the protagonist's suspicions that Dalby is in fact the traitor. The protagonist is discovered by Murray, who turns out to be an undercover operative from military intelligence, also investigating Dalby. The protagonist escapes, but is captured and taken to meet Jay. He has, however, allowed military intelligence to follow them, and Jay and Dalby are arrested by Colonel Ross. The protagonist reveals to Jean that Jay and Dalby were using a process called induction of psychoneurosis by conditioned IPCRESS with stress IPCRESS to brainwash the VIPs into loyalty to the Soviet Union. The links that Carswell had discovered were in fact indicators of the personality traits that Jay had used to determine which VIPs would easily succumb to the process. Colonel Ross's earlier attempt to sell information to the protagonist has been a test of his loyalty. The novel ends with the protagonist concluding his report to the minister, revealing that Jay has turned and began working for the British, while Dolby has ostensibly died in a car accident. Background: Dighton wrote in 1966, "I was earning enough money as an artist to write anything I chose. I chose a spy novel. I'd like to have a problem, or enigma, that could follow the action of the book, but I wanted the book to be arranged and entity as life is. I wanted the characterization and the dialogue to control the enigma, rather than the other way around, as had been the case with the detective novels of the 30s, which had become puzzles rather than stories. Above all, I was interested in the permutations of deceit and mistake. Too many people in the fiction I had read told the whole truth all the time, and never seemed to make a mistake of judgment. I decided to write a first-person narrative, in which the narrator would lie to anyone if it would suit his purpose, and choose a secret agent format so that I could use the political background that interested me. I owed a dub to Chandler, but was inspired by Beat the Devil, an old Degarts Lord film." Dighton added, in 1992, he said that the inspiration to write the novel came from his real-life neighbor, Anna Volkov, a white Russian emigre who collaborated with a cipher clerk from the American Embassy to spy for Germany in World War II. Dighton's mother cooked for Volkov's dinner parties, and he said that he vividly remembered when MI5 officers came to arrest her. The experience was a major factor in my decision to write a spy story at my first attempt at fiction. The plot involves mind control, the acronym IPCRESS of the title standing for Induction of Psychoneurosis by Condition of Reflex Under Stress. The brainwashing is similar to a shock technique called fast-check driving, pioneered by Donald Irwin Cameron in the 1950s, originally on enriching mental hospital patients, which was used and funded by the Central Intelligence Agency's secret MKUltra program in Canada. Novel: Dighton's protagonist is unnamed, and this is maintained throughout the sequels. Early in the novel, we learn that he worked for military intelligence for 3 years before joining his present agency, WOOCP, as a civilian employee. WOOCP is described as one of the smallest and most important of the intelligence units. It is never stated exactly what the initials stand for, although his previous boss refers to it as provisional. We also learn in passing that he is from Barnley, Lancashire, and that he was born in 1922 and 1923. WOOCP is a small department, and the unnamed protagonist has a great deal of autonomy. He is resourceful and prepared for any eventuality, keeping an escape package containing money, a false passport, and other documents circulating in the mail. He picks up the package from an accommodation address at a speedy London shop and remails it to that address in a fresh envelope. He is also a garment who enjoys good food. Cooking features frequently in both the film and the novel. Dighton himself is an accomplished cook. In common with several of his other early novels, the chapter headings have a feature in the IPCRESS file. These take the form of each chapter being headed with a quote from a horoscope, which relates to the action in the chapter, though vigorously as in most horoscopes. The front cover by Dighton's friend Wayman Hockey has been described as the template for the covers of all subsequent Airports novels. Film. Main article. The IPCRESS film. A film adaptation starring Michael Caine was released in 1965 and produced by the James Bond co-producer Harry Saltzman, assisted by several prominent members of the Bond production family. The film medium made it difficult to maintain the anonymity of Dighton's hero, who acquired the name Harry Palmer. The character's name was chosen by Kane, who was having lunch with Harry Saltzman. They were trying to think of a name for the protagonist, and agreed that a boring name would best suit the protagonist's persona. Saltzman asked what would be the most boring name they could think of, and Kane suggested the name Harry. They immediately apologized to Saltzman. However, Saltzman saw the funny side and pointed out that his real first name was actually Herschel, not Harry, so Saltzman was satisfied with it. The inspiration for the surname came from a boy called Palmer, whom Kane knew at school. Kane described Palmer as the most boring boy I'd ever met. The given name Harry actually occurs in a short sequence in the book, where the unnamed protagonist is greeted by someone saying, "Hello, Harry." This causes him to think, "Now, my name isn't Harry." But in this business, it's hard to remember whatever it ever had been. TV series. Main article. The IPCRESS File TV series. A television adaptation of the same name, directed by James Watkins and starring Joe Coe as Palmer, premiered on ITV on the 6th of March, 2022. Bye for now.